You train your body every day. But tell me, when was the last time you trained your mind to move with it? Most people build muscles, but live in mental chaos. They strike hard, but think slow. They breathe fast, but feel nothing. That's not strength. That's imbalance. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I was in the middle of a fight fast. Aggressive, all fire. But in the middle of the exchange, I lost control. My fist landed late. My timing collapsed. And my opponent saw it before I did. I wasn't out of shape. I was out of alignment. My body moved, but my mind lagged behind. That moment changed everything. I went home and created a new kind of training, one that fused body, breath, and awareness into a single flow. I didn't just become faster. I became centered. And if you want that same unshakable power, then listen carefully. Because this isn't just an exercise. It's a return to who you really are. 1. Slow down to unlock control. When I was younger, like many others, I believed that speed was the ultimate proof of strength. I wanted to move faster than anyone else. I practiced until my punches were too quick to see. My kicks snapped like whips. It looked impressive. People clapped. But inside, I knew something was missing. I was moving fast. Yes, but I wasn't truly connected to what I was doing. My movements were automatic, reactive, even sloppy beneath the surface. I wasn't in control. I was just in motion. And that's when I made one of the most important discoveries of my life. I slowed down. I began practicing every movement in slow motion, not because it was easy, but because it was honest. When you move slowly, you can't hide from your weaknesses. Every imbalance in your stance becomes obvious. Every shallow breath is exposed. Every twitch, every bit of unnecessary tension shows up like a spotlight is on it. And that's where real growth begins, not in hiding, but in noticing. I started feeling my entire body working together or failing to. I could feel when my shoulder was doing more than it should, when my hips weren't aligned, when my mind wasn't present. Slowing down became my teacher. It was painful at first. It forced me to face my flaws. But then, something incredible happened. I began to refine, to adjust, to correct. My movements became deliberate, clean, grounded. When I eventually returned to speed, I was no longer fast just to be fast. I was fast with precision, fast with control. And that made all the difference. Speed by itself is just motion, but speed built on awareness, that's power. Slowing down gave me access to a level of mastery I never reached through raw intensity. So now, I tell every serious student of any discipline, whether martial arts, music, or even life, slow down. Not forever, but long enough to understand, long enough to feel. Because the person who moves with understanding will always outperform the one who moves with ego. Control doesn't come from going harder. It comes from going deeper. And to go deeper, you must first slow down. 2, breathe before you act. When I was in my early stages of training, I underestimated something vital, me breath. I thought strength came only from the muscles. I thought control came from willpower. But I was wrong. During intense sparring sessions, I'd often find myself out of breath, tense, and scattered. Even when my technique looked sharp, something felt off inside. My mind was rushing, my body was tight, and my energy would burn out quickly. That's when I started studying more deeply, not just martial arts, but the internal arts, Taoist philosophy, Chinese medicine, Zen breathing. I realized breath wasn't just a background process, it was the foundation of everything. I began observing how I breathed. When I was calm, my breath was slow and full. When I was nervous, it was shallow and fast. And during combat, it was almost non-existent. So I made a decision. I would retrain myself not just to move, but to breathe. In my secret exercise, every motion began with breath. Before I stepped, I inhaled. Before I struck, I exhaled. And not mindlessly did it with presence. The breath grounded me. It told my body, now is the moment. And slowly, my training changed. My reactions became smoother. My timing became sharper. I was no longer just moving. I was moving with life itself. You see, breath is rhythm, and rhythm is power. The greatest martial artists, the greatest musicians, the greatest thinkers, they all have one thing in common: control over their breath. When your breath is erratic, your mind follows. When your breath is steady, your focus sharpens. Breath is the bridge between the physical and the mental. It is the only system in the body that is both automatic and controllable. And that is the gift. Because when you learn to control your breath, you begin to control your emotional state, your reactions, even your presence. This isn't just about fighting. It's about how you live. Before you respond to anger, breathe. Before you make a decision, breathe. Before you take a step forward in life, breathe. Don't let the world pull you into reaction. Let your breath pull you into awareness. Because the one who breathes with intention moves with clarity, and the one who moves with clarity cannot be shaken. I once said, the successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus. But that focus doesn't come from talent. It comes from breath. Train your lungs before you train your limbs. Train your stillness before your speed. And you will discover a deeper strength than any punch could offer. 3. Let your posture reflect your discipline. In the early days of my journey, I didn't pay much attention to posture. I was focused on action, on how fast I could move, how hard I could hit, how intense I looked in the mirror. But there was a moment that shifted everything for me. I was watching a Tai Chi master, an old man, calm and still. He stood like a mountain, barely moving, yet there was a presence about him. He didn't need to throw a punch. His stillness spoke louder than noise. His posture radiated power, peace, and complete control. And that's when I realized posture isn't just physical, it's psychological, it's spiritual. So I began to study my own posture, not just how I stood in the dojo, but how I walked into a room, how I carried myself when no one was watching. I started noticing patterns. When I was distracted, my shoulders slouched. When I was impatient, my legs shifted too often. When I was stressed, my chest caved in. My posture was revealing the state of my mind before I even opened my mouth. So I began to correct it, not just for appearance, but for alignment. I trained myself to stand tall, but relaxed, rooted, but fluid. I practiced standing meditation for hours at a time, feet shoulder width apart, spine straight, chin slightly tucked, shoulders soft, arms hanging heavy like branches. I let my breath settle into my belly, and I watched my thoughts. This simple act taught me more about myself than any fight ever could. Because when your body is aligned, your thoughts begin to align. And when both are aligned, your actions become effortless. In combat, good posture means balance, readiness, and economy of motion. In life, it means confidence, clarity, and self-respect. The way you hold your body becomes the way you move through the world. If you're always hunched over, tense, tight, then your decisions will also be reactive, defensive, fearful. But when you hold yourself upright, grounded, calm, your entire energy shifts. People can feel it. And more importantly, so can you. I used to think power came from the explosive things, kicks, punches, speed. But the older I got, the more I realized real power comes from the subtle, the unseen. And posture is one of the subtlest forms of power. It's the expression of everything you believe about yourself, made visible without a word. That's why monks, warriors, dancers, and true masters all carry themselves with grace, because their outer form is the reflection of their inner order. So I tell you this: watch how you sit, how you stand, how you walk into a room. Don't fix it for vanity. Fix it for clarity. Because posture is not just about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself. Train your body to stand with integrity, and your mind will follow. When your posture reflects discipline, it becomes your silent teacher, reminding you every moment of who you truly are. 4. Strike without noise. When I first started learning martial arts, I was loud. I yelled when I moved. I grunted when I struck. I thought noise meant energy. That sound somehow made my power more real. And in some ways, it did help me release emotion. But over time, I began to observe something deeper. I noticed that the more emotion I put into my strikes, the less control I had. When I fought with anger, my judgment suffered. When I fought with pride, my timing broke. The more noise I metaphysically or mentally, the more I lost touch with the purity of movement. And so, I began to train in silence. I started watching myself in the mirror, not just the movement, but the energy behind it. Was I striking from calmness or chaos? Was I acting from awareness or from ego? I started asking myself, what if I threw this punch without any emotion? No pride, no rage, just clarity. And that's when my entire practice shifted. The power didn't go away. In fact, it grew. Because without emotion clouding my focus, my strikes became cleaner, faster, and more accurate. I realized something very few understand: emotion is heavy. And when you carry it into movement, it slows you down. My 1-inch punch, the move that surprised the world, wasn't powerful because I was angry. It wasn't powerful because I screamed. It was powerful because I was completely still inside. No tension in my face, no unnecessary contraction in my muscles, just focus, just alignment, just raw, clean energy moving through a relaxed body. That's the real secret. Relaxation is power, and silence is control. I began to train every technique as a meditation, not a performance. I would practice striking in complete silence. No facial expression, no tight breathing, just movement flowing from stillness. It felt unnatural at first, especially coming from a world where fighters are taught to roar and scream and explode. But over time, my silence became louder than any shout. It carried a weight, a presence. My opponents could feel it, not in my voice, but in the stillness before the strike. the calm before the storm. That is where real danger lives. I also noticed something else. When you move silently, you become harder to read. Your opponent doesn't know when you'll strike. They can't hear your rhythm. They can't feel your emotion. They are left in uncertainty, and that gives you the advantage. I trained to eliminate all tells, no flinching, no anticipation, no noise, just pure motion, born from awareness. But this isn't just about fighting. This is about life. We live in a world that celebrates loudness. People shout to be heard, overreact to be seen, and argue just to prove they exist. But true power doesn't need to announce itself. The strongest people I've ever met didn't raise their voices. They didn't seek attention. They didn't fight every battle. They were centered, clear, silent inside. And from that silence came their strength. So I urge you to practice this, not just in your training, but in your life. Next time someone insults you, don't react with noise. To be silent. Next time life throws chaos at you, don't panic. Be still. When you strike, whether with a word, a decision, or emotion, let it come from a place of silence. Because silence is not the absence of power, it is the refinement of it. Remember this. A tiger doesn't roar before it attacks. It moves in silence. And then, without warning, it unleashes everything. Train yourself to strike like that, with precision, with control, with calm. And when you do, the world will begin to feel your presence, even when you say nothing at all. 5. See with your skin. There came a point in my training when I began to question everything I relied on. Sight, sound, thought. I realized most people are prisoners of their eyes. They believe only what they see. They depend on visual confirmation before they trust their instincts. But what happens when your opponent moves faster than your eyes can register? What happens when darkness blinds you, when chaos surrounds you? If you only see with your eyes, then you are limited by your environment. But if you learn to feel, truly feel, then you carry awareness with you wherever you go. And that is what I trained for. I remember one particular session with my teacher where I was blindfolded. At first, I panicked. I reached, but missed. I hesitated. Every move felt uncertain. But then something shifted. I started tuning in to the pressure in the air. I noticed the slightest brush of fabric, the change in temperature as someone moved near. I began feeling the floor through my feet in a new, way subtle vibrations, shifts in balance, and slowly the fear disappeared. The eyes closed, but the senses opened. My awareness no longer came from sight. It came from within. From that day forward, I began training regularly with my eyes closed. I practiced forms, sparring drills, even partner flows all without the use of vision. And what I discovered was one of the greatest lessons of my life. The body knows. Your skin, your breath, your bones, they all speak if you're willing to listen. I could feel when an attack was coming, not because I saw it, but because I sensed the energy behind it. A tightening of breath, a shift in weight, a pause before explosion. These signals are always there, but most people are too distracted to feel them. In my secret exercise, I emphasized this principle deeply. I would stand still and close my eyes, tuning into the world around me. Not to react, but to observe. To let the body absorb everything before the mind could interfere. I trained myself to trust what I felt, not what I saw. Over time, I reached a state where my body would respond before I consciously made a decision. This wasn't magic. This was awareness refined through practice. The kind of awareness that doesn't panic in the dark. It moves with certainty, even in uncertainty. There is a kind of intelligence in the body that we often ignore. We've been taught to overthink, to calculate, to wait for proof. But sometimes, the body knows the answer before the mind catches up. I once said, don't think, feel. Not because thinking is wrong, but because overthinking separates you from the moment. Feeling connects you to it. When you rely only on the mind, you hesitate. But when you let the body lead, you enter flow. You move with the situation, not against it. I also applied this principle outside the fight. In daily life, I would practice sensing energy in a room, the way people walked, the tone beneath their words, the silent tensions. When you become sensitive enough, you don't need people to explain themselves. You feel their intention. You sense their state of being. And this helps you respond, not with judgment, but with awareness. This is what real perception is. Not just noticing what is said or done, but what is unsaid and unshown. So I encourage you, train your skin to see, train your breath to listen, train your body to feel, spend time in silence, practice movement with your eyes closed, walk in nature without headphones, stand still in a crowded place and observe without looking. You'll be amazed at how alive everything becomes when you stop relying only on vision. When your body becomes a radar, your reactions become instant. You're no longer responding to surface. You're responding to truth. Remember, the eye can be fooled, but your inner awareness, when trained, is unshakable. It doesn't just help you fight better. It helps you live better, with presence, with clarity, with intuition that cuts through noise. When you learn to see with your skin, you no longer chase clarity, you carry it within you. 6. Erase the delay between thought and action. In the beginning of my training, I lost many fights. Not because I wasn't strong, not because I lacked speed, but because I hesitated. I would see the opening, I would feel the moment, but by the time my mind approved the decision, the window had already closed. Hesitation was my enemy, and not just in combat. It crept into every part of my life. It was there when I questioned my ideas, when I waited too long to speak, when I second-guessed my instinct. That tiny gap between thought and action, it was the reason I fell behind. So I made it my mission to erase that gap completely. I started observing myself more carefully. Every time I paused before a strike, every time I hesitated to move, I asked why. What am I waiting for? I realized that most hesitation is fear wearing the mask of logic, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being wrong. And all that fear creates a delay. It makes you overthink. It disconnects you from the present. So I began to train not just my body, but my trust. I had to learn to trust what I felt more than what I calculated. That's when repetition became my greatest ally. I practiced each movement thousands of times, not just to build muscle memory, but to dissolve the need to think about it. When I practiced a side kick, I didn't just train my leg. I trained the entire chain of response. The intention, the breath, the shift of weight, the timing, the release. I broke it down so deeply that eventually I no longer had to do it, it simply happened. When the opening appeared, my body responded before my mind could even speak. And that's what flow is. It's not speed. It's not luck. It's the removal of resistance between what you feel and what you express. I remember a moment during sparring where my opponent threw a sudden punch. I didn't see it coming. I didn't think. But my hand moved, blocked it, and countered all in one smooth motion. Afterwards, someone asked me, "How did you react so fast?" I told them the truth didn't react. I flowed. It wasn't me thinking. It was me becoming the motion, and that's the key. Thinking is useful when you're learning, but in the moment of performance, thinking becomes a trap. You must reach a point where thought and movement are one. This principle goes far beyond martial arts. In life, how many opportunities do we miss because we wait for permission from the mind? How many times do we know what to say, what to do, but hesitate until the moment is gone? You know the feeling. You feel it in your gut. Your heart races, your instinct says go, but your brain says wait. And by the time you act, it's too late. The door has closed. The silence has become awkward. The courage has faded. So, I ask you, what would life look like if you trusted your instinct more than your fear? What if you trained yourself so deeply that action became a natural extension of your awareness? This doesn't mean being reckless. It means being prepared. It means doing the work in silence so that when the moment comes, you don't need to prepare, you simply respond. I spent countless hours perfecting one movement, one form, not because I loved repetition, but because repetition removes resistance. It burns away doubt. It creates direct access to execution. Repetition is how you earn the right to stop thinking. When you do something over and over with precision, it begins to live in your bones. And that's where mastery begins, not in knowing what to do, but in doing it without needing to explain it to yourself. In time, my entire way of living shifted. I made decisions faster. I trusted my creative instincts. I stopped waiting for the perfect moment and began to act in the now. And as I did, I noticed something powerful. Life responded faster to me. Doors opened. People listened. Opportunities came. Not because I forced them, but because I moved with the rhythm of the moment. I erased hesitation from my body, and it disappeared from my path. So train to eliminate delay. Drill your craft until hesitation becomes impossible, and prepare so deeply that your actions require no approval. When the moment comes, don't wait. Move. Speak. Strike. Because the world doesn't reward the thinker who waits, it rewards the doer who trusts. Remember this. Hesitation is the enemy of flow, and flow is the signature of the master. 7. Become what you repeat. There is a truth most people never realize in their lifetime. You are becoming something every single day. Not through a single choice, not through what you claim to believe, but through what you repeat. Your habits, your thoughts, your movements, your reactions, these are your true teachers. And whether you know it or not, they are shaping you. The question is, are they shaping you into what you want to be, or into what you've passively allowed? Early in my journey, I was obsessed with technique. I wanted to learn every punch, every kick, every possible angle of attack. I thought the more I knew, the better I would be. But the truth hit me hard one day. I was spreading myself too thin. I knew many things, but I wasn't mastering anything. I was practicing for performance, not for transformation. And so I changed everything. I took a single movement, one strike, one concept, and repeated it over and over until it was no longer something I did. It was something I became. People always ask me how I developed the 1-inch punch. They imagined it was some hidden trick, some mystical force. But the truth is far more grounded. I trained it thousands of times. Every angle, every breath, every inch of posture, every flick of energy. I visualized it. I dissected it. I lived it. I breathed it. I repeated it until it was no longer something I needed to remember. It was a part of me. It wasn't that my body was faster. It was that my body no longer asked for permission. It simply expressed what had been planted deeply through repetition. I began to understand that repetition is not boring shit, is sacred. It is the path to mastery, and not just physical mastery, but emotional, mental, spiritual. Every time you repeat a thought, you make it stronger. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you forge a new part of your identity. Every time you breathe calmly in chaos, you hardwire peace into your nervous system. Repetition builds muscle, but more importantly, it builds character. And this is why I always said, I fear not the man who has practiced 10 zero kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10 0 times. Not because that man knows more, but because that man has become the kick. He's burned away doubt. He's carved his attention into something sharp and focused. When the moment comes, he doesn't need to choose. He simply becomes. And this doesn't just apply to fighting. This applies to how you wake up, how you speak, how you handle pain, how you respond to disrespect. The things you repeat in private are the things that shape you in public. If you constantly repeat laziness, you don't just act lazy, you become lazy. If you repeat anger, you become rage. If you repeat doubt, your mind begins to identify with failure before you even begin. But if you repeat calm, strength, clarity, breath, then those qualities become your nature. And when something becomes your nature, no one can take it from you. For me, martial arts was not a performance, was a mirror. Every repeated movement showed me what I lacked, what I feared, what I avoided. But instead of running from it, I used the repetition to confront it. Every mistake became a lesson. Every drill became a chance to choose better. I practiced with full presence, and that presence transformed me, because presence is power, and repetition with presence is what creates greatness. So I say to you, now, be careful what you repeat. Be careful what you tolerate, because over time, you will become it. If you want to be focused, then practice focus every day, even in the smallest task. If you want to be fearless, then choose courage every day, even in quiet moments. Don't wait to feel ready. Readiness comes through repetition. Don't wait for motivation. Discipline comes from action. Start small, start slow, but start with full attention. The world is full of people chasing greatness, but very few understand this greatness isn't something you find. It's something you become by choosing the same direction again and again, even when no one is watching, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, because the one who becomes their practice becomes their power. You don't rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the level of your preparation. And preparation is built on what you do every single day. So repeat with purpose, repeat with discipline, repeat until your truth is no longer what you say, but what you are. 8. Express, don't perform. There came a time in my journey when I realized something important. I was no longer training to become better. I was training to be seen as better. I wasn't expressing myself. I was performing for the world. And that distinction, though subtle, was deeply dangerous. You see, performance is built on expectation. It's driven by approval. When you perform, you adjust who you are to match what others want. But when you express, you move from a place of truth. You're not trying to impress. You're trying to release. Not trying to convince, but to reveal. And that changed everything for me. I remember standing in front of a crowd, performing a demonstration. My techniques were sharp. My form was clean. And yet, something inside me felt hollow. I was doing what I knew people wanted to see, but not what I truly needed to feel. I realized I had fallen into a trap. I had begun to seek validation instead of alignment. And so I went back to the roots, back to the silence, back to training alone, without cameras, without eyes, without applause. And in that quiet space, I found myself again. My movements became more honest, my breath more grounded. I stopped performing. I started expressing. You see, when you perform, your energy goes outward. You chase approval. You seek reaction. And in doing so, you lose touch with yourself. But when you express, your energy flows from within. It's not concerned with judgment. It's not bound by fear. It simply flows. And that flow, that unfiltered, present, authentic flow is where true power lives. It's where your art becomes a mirror of your soul. And that is what martial arts is truly about. Not perfection, not showmanship, but raw, real, present expression. I train my students to understand this. I would say, don't do what I dobe, what you are. And at first, they didn't understand. They wanted technique. They wanted systems. But eventually, they realized technique without expression is just movement. It's empty. What makes it powerful is the energy behind it, the intention, the clarity, the presence. When you punch, don't just punch. Feel the punch. To be the punch. Express what is inside you through the motion. Then it becomes real. Then it becomes alive. I often said, all knowledge leads to self-knowledge, because that is the purpose of training, not to become someone else, but to return to yourself. Every strike, every breath, every repetition should bring you closer to your essence. It should strip away the false layers, the ego, the insecurity, the noise. That's why I rejected the idea of fixed styles. I didn't want to become a copy. I wanted to create a path that was my own. I didn't want to perform someone else's movements. I wanted to express what was real for me in that moment, through my body, through my breath, through my art. This mindset applies far beyond martial arts. In your work, in your relationships, in your daily life, are you performing or are you expressing? Are you shaping yourself to meet the expectations of others? Or are you speaking from a place of truth? Performance is exhausting because it requires constant editing. Expression is liberating because it requires only honesty. When you express, you move with freedom, you speak with clarity, you live without apology. But expression requires courage. It requires trust. It means letting go of control and letting the moment move through you. It means accepting that not everyone will understand. Not everyone will clap. Not everyone will like what you show. But that's okay, because you're not here to impress. You're here to express. And when you train with that mindset, you grow faster, deeper, stronger, because you're no longer chasing something. You're releasing what's already within you. So I encourage you, stop performing, start expressing, stop rehearsing, start flowing. Whether you're in the gym, on stage, at work, or in silence with yourself, let everything you do be a reflection of what is real. Train until your expression is clean, until your movements are true, until your presence speaks louder than words. Because when you no longer need approval to move, when you no longer need applause to act, when you are free to be yourself in every moment, that's when you've become powerful. Not because the world sees it, but because you finally do. You've heard the lessons. You've walked with me through the stillness, the breath, the silence, the repetition. Now understand this: none of it matters if you do not live it. Wisdom without action is like a sword never drawn. It may be beautiful, but it is useless in the moment of truth. I didn't train just to move better. I trained to live better, to know myself, to remove the distance between who I was and who I was meant to be. That is the real purpose of alignment, not to impress the world, but to integrate the self. Every time I stepped into the dojo, it wasn't about fighting. It was about facing myself, my impatience, my ego, my fear. I used movement to cut through noise. I used breath to return to presence. I used repetition to shape my truth. And over time, the separation between the martial artist and the man disappeared. I didn't just throw a punch. I expressed my soul. I didn't just block an attack. I responded with awareness. That is what I want for you, not to copy me, but to meet yourself. You see, the greatest battle is not fought against others. It is fought within, against hesitation, against confusion, against the false voices telling you you're not enough. But the moment you align your body and your mind, the moment you begin to train with intention, to move with stillness, to act without doubt, that's when you win. Not because the world calls you strong, but because your soul does. Many people chase balance, but balance is not something you find. It's something you build. Every breath you take with awareness lays a brick. Every movement you repeat with care lays another. Every act of discipline becomes a beam that supports your inner temple. And when that temple is built strong, no storm can shake it. You become unbreakable or not, because life gets easier, but because you get clearer. The true master is not loud. The true master does not boast. The true master is the one who moves through life with silent power, clear focus, and deep humility. He knows his strength because he built it in silence. He knows his path because he carved it with discipline. And he walks it not for glory, but because it is his truth. So now, the question is no longer, what should I do? The question is, what will I become if I do it every day? Your body listens to your repetition. Your mind listens to your breath. Your soul listens to your choices. Align them, train them, honor them, and one day you will no longer be someone searching for power. You will be someone who radiates it effortlessly. Do not chase becoming someone else. Do not seek to wear another's form. Instead, strip away what is not you. Remove what is borrowed. Let go of what is fake. And what remains will be your own form, your own rhythm, your own way. That is what I did. That is what I teach. And that is what I now pass on to you. Move with stillness. Breathe with awareness. Train with purpose. Express with honesty. And above all, become the way.